StreamYard. It's very fancy. All right.
Yes.
So I am here. I am live. We are now live now. I am joined with Jesse Grant. We are talking about our debates. Where is man? That was a little bit of an old episode. I'm kind of over it by now. So I can see my live viewers. Apparently I should have more than 0 live viewers if my wits are about me.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I've got 4. Okay, so I know that that's BS. All right, so we're here with Jesse Grant. Now, you actually debated Vaush?
Yeah, I did actually. I debated him about 8 months ago on the issue of immigration.
Did you like call into a stream or something?
No, we had it. Well, I did call into his stream through his Discord, but we had it pre-planned. I had emailed him, and we set up a date and time, and yeah, it wasn't the most certain, as you'll see. It's not the best performance, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I basically had to trick Vaush. I basically BS'd him. I told him I was a part of a group which does actually exist, but I'm not a part of. It's local to California, and I basically just lied to him in order to get on his stream. But I wasn't actually aware. When did I debate Vaush? I debated Vaush 7 months ago, so he actually beat me by a month. So that's probably why I never ended up seeing it. But
Yeah.
if you have the link, well, I don't know. Streamable, StreamYard's kind of fucked in terms of the audio, but
Yeah.
all right. How many people do we have? Yeah, in total. Okay, we got 14 in here. Yeah, in total, in terms of what I saw when I was debating Vosh, did you see my debate with Vosh?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, so one of the things that I noticed, I lied to him and I basically came in as this professional person. A lot of what those types of people on the internet like to do is they like to come around, they like to BS, they like to play shenanigans in games. You know, if you saw that man in the wall guy, kid, whatever you want to call him, you know, he
Yeah.
kind of takes on a few of those tactics. Like, one thing that they'll do, for example, is switch from topic to topic to topic, and it's just a giant gish gallop. It's just something that you do to basically throw as much shit to the wall and hope it sticks. But what I try to do is really pinpoint on a certain idea, really force him to confront something, and when I really just forced him to see this, to handle this certain idea, he just got to a point where he just absolutely cannot respond to it, and then he just went off. He waved it away. Oh, you know, I'll have to do more research into it. And then Vosh's fans actually came back and they started calling me, you know, hey, this guy's a lunatic tanky because the title is lunatic tanky. They started calling me a moron, an idiot, all these inflammatory names. So that's just the nature of his audience, honestly. I mean, he can come on stream, for example, with me for like the first 50 minutes. He can be all civil, he can be all nice and do discourse, but in reality, everyone knows that his basic sex cult is always going to abide by him. Did you have was your debate with him just kind of heated?
Oh, extremely, extremely. Th- yeah, dude, like people nonstop like left voicemails on my phone telling me my address and shit, and it was pretty rough. I was going through a rough time after that, and it's not even
Damn.
him. Like if it was just him and I lost to him clean, that's fine and all. But it was like his audience was relentless, and of course I'll give credit to him. He told them to stop. He didn't encourage them to dox me and do a bunch of stuff to me, but yeah, him and I actually spoke the other day, and we're not on that bad of terms. So I wanted to go back and I want to like review what I did wrong, what I probably stated incorrectly, or rather just like even framing. Like it could be just a framing issue of I didn't articulate it correctly.
Yeah, yeah, I see. I'm lucky enough to know I've been doxxed. Like, I do know a thing or two about like staying safe on the internet and operation security, but it's just really, really dangerous. Like going against someone who has those kinds of personal views. But yeah, I mean, I agree that at the end of the day, he is a showmanship. I mean, he is a showman. Like if you look at what he's saying right now, we have Jimmy Dore talking about forcing the vote for Medicare for all. He's over here talking about defeating Donald Trump like we're still stuck in 2016, 2017 or something. It's just completely ridiculous. So let me go ahead and actually find that debate
Yeah,
with Vaush if
it's
you have the
really
link.
easy. Yeah, it's real easy, dude. If you just type my name, Jesse Grant, then it'll probably be the first thing you see.
Okay, debating conservative socialist Jesse Grant. Now, one thing he likes to do, which he self-admitted, and I admit I do too, he comes up with a lot of inflammatory titles. Would you call yourself a conservative socialist?
To be fair to him, at the time, I did, and that's what I told him in the email. I was not a Marxist-Leninist. I was a reactionary, and I made
Uh-huh.
that clear in my most recent video. Uh, but yeah, he's not inaccurate in saying that. But I think the thumbnail most definitely is inflammatory, and he put the Pepe Frog as if it was a literal Nazi. And
Yeah,
during
like an
the debate, as you'll
alt-rightist.
see, right, and he took my at the time just relatively anti-immigration view as simply being like nothing more than ethno-nationalism, which is not accurate because I had told him repeatedly that I was not an ethno-nationalist. I was simply just opposing it for economic reasons, and here was my studies. But of course, that didn't turn out so well, and he was able to muddy the waters from the beginning and make it seem like I am indeed an ethno-nationalist, which I am not.
Oh, where do I find that clip of Unruh calling his neighbor a fag? No, that was actually at the beginning of a video. Unruh called some bikers a fag. But yeah, I see your. One thing he did for me, for example, was he put a quote Trotsky deserved to die on my thing. And the thing
Yeah,
is when you say that someone deserves to die and then you call someone a lunatic, obviously you're framing it in a certain way. But if you don't go over the history of what happened, then you just it's obvious that you're obfuscating. So I mean, I understand. I've actually made a video talking about immigration, and I've been called a Nazbol and a lot of things. But the thing is most people don't understand that there's a difference, at least, between being completely open borders and being completely closed borders, or being, sending out ICE agents to stop Trump. Now,
right.
a word of warning: there's going to be no volume, so I'm going to have to find. What are some certain points that you think you fucked up on? First of all,
Oh,
I mean,
well,
obviously you
most
talked about how
definitely.
you were a bit of a reactionary.
Yeah, yeah, there were plenty of points. I mean, in this debate, I don't think I was necessarily being reactionary, but the first half of this video is literally just about the fact that I reposted some of the quote unquote Vaush is a pedo memes. I'm sure you've seen some of that on like Twitter and
Yeah.
stuff. Uh, he very much took it to heart, and he acted like I was the only person that had done that.
Uh
so,
huh.
I'll admit that was pretty immature for me to do that from the get go. Like to email him nicely and then post those memes. I guess I could see like how that's kind of messed up. But like the thing is, I made it very clear that that's not what I wanted to debate on. I didn't want to debate whether he's a pedo. That's not a that's not a good topic to
Uh
go
huh.
over because I can't prove either way. You know.
Mm.
So yeah, that yikes! It's a pretty cringe debate, but I think this is one of the ways that I'm going to be able to get through it, and we can both talk about it and discuss it.
Uh huh. Of course. So so right here you're talking about how workers have been forced to sell their labor for a sustenance wage.
Right.
Their value in the job market is decreasing, which are both they're both absolutely true points. By the way, if we look at um, various visa programs which have been brought in, it's basic. It's basic. If you've read Capital, I hate to say that over and over again, but if you even just look at how supply and demand works in capitalism, if you import tons of cheap labor, or if you employ tons of cheap labor, let's say virtually, if you go to India and you get a bunch of Java programmers to program your back end, then obviously the price of the workers is going to be way down, because over there maybe they're buying their purchasing power is much lower, so the U.S. dollar is going to be much heavier over there. It's just a matter of basically performing a NAFTA with all of these visa programs, bringing in all of these cheap labor, and most people look at it for skin color. Most people. One thing I got told is, "Why do you hate brown people?" And it's hilarious to me because there are so many examples of quote unquote white people um, immigrating to quote unquote white countries and doing the exact same thing. An example is with the UK. I mean, there are a huge amount of Polish people that are immigrating to the UK and all over Europe, and they go into blue collar jobs, they become janitors, etc. And they drive down the wages of all of these other native blue collar workers. Now, the solution is extremely complex, but to say that we should have open, I mean, obviously Vaush will obfuscate, and he'll deflect and dodge, and he'll say, "Well, we don't have to do it immediately. We can wait for my perfect socialist utopia to come about." But
Right.
if we look right now, it's obvious that it's having a negative. It has had a negative effect on lower columns of society.
I mean, most certainly. If you look at, like, you mentioned Borjas in your immigration video. A study by Borjas actually said that large scale immigration, therefore, may not drive down wages in particular cities. In which, if you look at the study that Vaush used against me, which was
Yeah.
primarily from Giovanni Perry, I think that's his name. Yeah, Giovanni Perry. The study that he used, it did sample lots of big cities such as Seattle and LA and places like that. And I don't think that's honest. And the thing is, the study he gave, it's a lot more
Mhm.
of a matter of political interpretation, because it's got more of a political connotation to it over strictly economic and empirical. And yeah, Borjas made a point of saying large scale immigration, therefore, may not drive down wages in particular cities. Rather, its depressing effect on wages is nationwide. In which, if you're seeing like a lot of these lower income places, for example, in Tar Heel, North Carolina, which is something I'll actually mention in this debate. Tar Heel, North Carolina, it's known for its Smithfield plant. Well, the thing about Smithfield, it has a lot of illegal immigrants there, or undocumented workers, whatever you want to say. It's got a lot of them working there, and that's not uncommon for undocumented workers to be working in the food industry, particularly meat packing. Now, if you look at it this way, this is the way I like to think about it. There's an old saying that the United States feeds the world. And so when you consider the fact that we, like Smithfield, we sell our ham to China, we sell our ham all over the globe. And so quite literally, the whole phrase "feed the world," the food trade has driven lots of aspects of imperialism. No,
Yeah. I mean, the fact that so this was at a point personally for me where I thought this was before the whole Biden or bust thing. This was before the whole riding with Biden, blue no matter who bullshit. Anti-force the vote. I actually thought that Bosch had at least some modicum of good faith. But it's obvious now that his feelings come before his fact, especially if you look at what Hakeem has responded to, and his response to Hakeem, which is basically a hand wave. Vaush does not realize, because of his lack of reading, the fact that this is exactly what libertarian parties in the United States are pushing for in the first place. The free movement of labor is the best thing that can happen for the Libertarian Party and for the capitalist class, because if you have a group of workers that are small and contained, they can organize and they can unionize, but as long as you have that infinitely expanding pool of labor where you can have anyone coming in, I'm willing to work for. I mean, look at just COVID, for example. Like, I was trying to get a haircut today. I was going everywhere, all over, looking for a haircut. Nobody can give me a damn haircut. And the reason why that people who are illegally open right now can charge for so much is because there's really nowhere else you can go. Well, it's the same thing with the union. I mean, what are you going to do, for example, if you're in a small town in the middle of Wyoming or something and you have a worker group and, for example, you have a steel plant and that worker group unionizes? Well, what are you going to do? Go hire more workers when your population is like, what, 1 million people, and it's all, the population density is extremely low? So that's the thing. I mean, and it also happens in Europe, for example. You know, they're always talking about how, oh, well, the population rates and the birth rates in Europe are so low. Well, another thing is that in Europe, they need to have cheap labor in order to function. You know, there's this really funny mockumentary called Living Without a Mexican, or I think it was A Day Without a Mexican. And it essentially basically goes through this mockumentary style discovery of what happens when you don't have all of this cheap imported labor. And one thing is that the whole system would really collapse. I mean, the amount of profit would absolutely just plummet. But
Right.
okay, so Vaush is about to respond. Okay, and another thing that I wanted to point out too quickly is just Vaush's chat will automatically jump into race politics because this is how they are programmed. Uh, Don Cucino says, I'm saying this as the son of a Mexican immigrant. Even though undocumented immigrants face the worst exploitation, they are the least likely to overthrow the system. You know, the problem is that a lot of people tend to look at undocumented immigrants as we tend to do this emotionally, and we have to back off from the emotional aspect of this, and we have to look at the wider picture. We have to look at the real economic picture. We have to look at numbers. And the problem is that if we keep letting people in, for example, for emotions, then we're never going to then all we're doing is supporting this global imperialism, and we're just doing it out of morals. I mean, what would happen, for example, if Mexico wasn't corrupt, if it wasn't run by a bunch of drug lords and the cartels? What would happen if Mexico had the same economic development as us? Well, obviously they wouldn't be coming here. So what we need to do is promote third world nationalism in order to develop these countries, because all of the doctors from, you know, Nigeria and Africa are coming to the US, and these countries are being left without doctors, engineers. All of these important jobs are coming here and being sucked out by the US. But Fosh is responding.
Sure. After that, I want to get to Pepe's comment.
For sure. All right.
Okay, here. All right. Well, I can't hear the video, first of all. And secondly, this
Yeah,
person
I was
says
just listening.
immigrants don't suppress wages. I guess they mean depress. The bourgeoisie does. We should show solidarity and fight capitalism together. Yes, I don't disagree with that statement, but here's the problem. For example, on the issue of trade, we view immigration the exact same we do trade. We're not principally against countries giving aid to each other, otherwise we wouldn't believe in mutual aid. But we do have a problem, however, with global finance capital, and we have an issue with all the, like I said, the global finance capital going all over the place, because the markets simply cannot be big within one country. If they get so big, they have to spread everywhere. And the point we're trying to make here is that immigrants are equally a good to be traded around the world. And so this is the problem here. We're not inherently against the idea of countries giving each other goods any more than we're against countries giving each other immigrants. We don't have a problem with that. What we do have a problem with is that being used to exploit working people, in which immigrants are the working people in this case, and that global finance capital being traded around at the expense of the worker.
Yeah, that's true. You know, one thing that happens when you approach social issues from a non-materialist perspective is that you kind of move into these copes, you move into these thoughts, you know, well, why is it that someone is against immigration in the first place? You know, someone like me, for example, right now in the capitalist world against mass open borders and immigration. Well, you have to think, I don't understand the economic aspects of this because I haven't done the necessary research. So my biggest cope and my biggest, I guess, understanding how I'm going to connect these thoughts together and understand them is through race, is through skin color or ethnicity. But the biggest thing is that ultimately what we're against is imperialism. Ultimately what we're against is using these workers to promote imperialism, because imperialism exists for well, imperialism has to exist, but super profits also has to exist if we want to continue to, massively double our economy every 25 years. We need to have extreme super profits. If we want to get skyscrapers full of Nike stores, we need super profits. And the only way we get super profits is by going to the corrupt third world nations and siphoning off all their doctors with brain drain.
But I totally agree. And the thing is, one of the arguments Vaush made against Sargon of Akkad is he said that when more immigrants come in, more tax revenue is present there in the government. Here's the thing about taxes. Taxes are inherently of itself a capitalist structure. If the government already owns it, it wouldn't need to tax it. So they're taxing private entities outside of governmental control, outside of public ownership. And I want to be clear here, public industry is not necessarily publicly owned. It's just government owned, in which the government does have a monopoly on most things that are public. Even the police. The police have to bargain with markets. They're not entirely publicly owned, and they certainly don't have to listen to everyday people, as we know by the Black Lives Matter protests. So the thing here is, what we're trying to say is that we want to do away with the system entirely because we understand that this is what is unfortunately happening. Wages are going down. They're stagnant. And here's the thing. I don't know if you knew this, but in World War I, the minimum wage was about $5. All right, $5 in our time is $134. All right, could you imagine getting that an hour?
Yeah, I mean, there's that one graph that gets posted. Flea Market Socialist actually made a video about it. And, that's a true point. Immigration rarely raises the GDP. That's one big argument that Vaush made that I had to respond to in one of my videos, is his constant pandering towards the GDP. And it's just hilarious. I mean, it just shows how, first of all, it sounds silly, but for someone to look at something like a gross domestic product, and for someone to look at economic output, but not look at the relations behind that output, not look at the actual wealth of individual people, the minimum wage, and to just look at just how much wealth people are producing, is just something like a capitalist would do. I mean, it's just incredible, And another thing is, obviously, the GDP, absolutely not an indicator whatsoever of goodwill. I mean, there's the obvious graph of productivity versus our wages, which have gone 70% versus 9% productivity versus wages. I mean, it's just incredible, this very, very famous graph. What have we had? Like a 238, because of automation, etc., 238% growth productivity. Our hourly compensation is just absolutely stagnated behind. It's just incredible. It's incredible how you can justify this, really. I mean, it's very, very simple. The more people you have that are willing to work for less, the more money you are going to get. It's a very, very simple thing. And if we have less pools of workers, that is a stronger, or if we have, let's say, a lot of workers, but it's a stable group of workers that unionize, that is stable. Now, Vaush will, of course, push for this, but at the same time, he'll go support the Democratic Party, which are best friends with their union-busting donors. So it's just the pure hypocrisy.
And you talk about union busting in California. I'm sure you know of this. There's a company called Hewlett Packard. Carly Fiorina, she ran for president in 2016. Big fan of workers' visas. Anyway, she organized. She had her her lawyers and stuff organized against the protests outside of Hewlett Packard of people who were simply mad at the fact that she was exploiting immigrants and that she was pushing hard for this work visa stuff when she's literally just going to exploit them. And, this happens a lot. It's not just her. It was also Sam Walton in the 90s with Bill Clinton. It was, multiple people. Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates today, they still want more immigration. I think Bill Gates gave a certain amount for like the ACLU immigration fund or something. But yeah, it's not unique to just her. But the point is, like, it's inherent to union busting. It's historically been connected. That a lot of times they would send these immigrants in who they know, their conditions of capitalism is really a lot worse because, third world versus first world. And so when they send these people in, they know they've got it bad. And so what happens is they are literally pitting the workers against each other. What's the famous thing they like to say? Oh, well, when you start hating on the immigration, that's when you divide the working class. No, it's been that way already, and they're the ones doing it. That's what they do. They like to divide us amongst each other. And so we're not able to unite with mutual aid and solidarity. So that's a lot of times what happens. These immigrants are brought in to scab union workers when they're going on strike.
Exactly. And Noah Watson makes a very good point. Less workers equals more wealth. It's the law of accumulation. When you have a greater reserve army, you're going to have a greater mass of surplus population. And, it's just having that unionization is so important. But when you're going and chilling for the DNC, then ultimately you're just supporting the union busters. I mean, it's just
right.
And it ultimately comes down to, I mean, we all know hindsight 2020. We all know that Vaush is not someone who is honest about his beliefs and is an obfuscator. We all know this, considering the fact, personally, in my debate, he basically flips the off switch where he's tired of getting told things that he doesn't understand. Like, for example, I told him in my debate that there were worker co-ops within the USSR who had constitutional right to their property. And I told him things like that over and over. What did he say? I will have to do more research. Well, eventually he gets to a point where he starts red baiting with Stalin, and then he walks me down this path that he's rehearsed 1,000 times, where he accuses me of being a tanky, talks over me, and then lets me go because we're at the hour mark, and it's convenient for him to leave off with that. And that's what everyone sees. You can show someone Vorhas's study, but ultimately what they're going to see is, or what they're going to remember is Vaush's soundbite.
Right. And I think he even pulled up a graph there that I didn't get a chance to see because I was not looking at his stream, but he was pulling up this rando-ass graph of like just the flow of immigrants and GDP increase.
Yeah, it's just an absolute non sequitur. I mean, GDP is essentially just how big the pie is. It's not how the pie is split. I mean, that's really the easiest way to visualize it. I mean, obviously, you can have massive amounts of wealth with one person at the top and little wealth with equal distribution. That's just how malleable it is. But to Vaush, that's not really something that concerns him because GDP is just going to be one of those factors that he can just use as a talking point. I mean, American Libertarian Party talking about open borders like it's the coming of Jesus Christ. I mean, American Libertarian Party on immigration. What do they say? Libertarians believe that people should be able to freely travel as long as they are peaceful. We welcome immigrants who come to seek a better life. The vast majority of immigrants are peaceful. A truly free market requires the free movement of people, not just products and ideas, which is like a really dystopian, like 1984 kind of. I mean, it's a trope, but to say 1984, but it's just a really, really telling sign. A truly free market requires the free movement of people, because people in capitalism produce value, and all they are a value producing machine. You are just a value. You are basically a block of human labor that imbues value into products. That's all you are, and you are bought and sold on the market for wage labor. And if we can have a better flow of these, value inducing machines, which are people, laborers, then we can have a more efficient market. We can get super profits, etc. I mean, it's a telling sign. They say it right there for everyone to see.
Yeah, and if you Google just benefits of immigration, you'll get first thing a page that says benefits of immigration outweigh the cost, and it's from the Bush Center, George W. Bush. So that's most definitely a very reliable source to go for immigration. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, did you see he actually cited the Heritage Foundation about immigration, and he made the point that even the Heritage Foundation agrees with me, as if that's supposed to be something to tout about. I mean,
Yeah, that
that would be
reminds me.
pretty embarrassing. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, that reminds me of like when TERFs get the gender ideology article from the Heritage Foundation. They're like, even they agree with it.
Yeah. Let's see, we have a question. Uh, let's just say, what percent of tankies would actually agree with your take on immigration? You know, it's funny because Jason Unruh had a debate with two prolific alt-writers, Richard Spencer and Eric Stryker. And in this debate, basically, Jason Unruh took a pro-immigration take. But the thing is that if you actually watch the debate, of course, there's two parts of it. Obviously, they're alt-right. They're, Nazis. They're going to make the cultural and ethnic part of it, which is a part of it that I'm not even which is a part of it that I vehemently disagree with, obviously. But the other part I don't disagree with is the economic part, because you can't disagree that the sky is blue as much as you can't disagree with hard mathematics. It's just something that occurs, and it's just something inherent to the system. And it's something that they are, you know, right about. I mean, admit it or not, we are all adults. They are right about. And then Jason later went on to correct his beliefs, and he actually faced some backlash for it. But ultimately, they were right about it. Libertarians' way of saying, if you can't work, we don't want you. Yeah, that's really what it is. I mean, at the end of the day, if you aren't someone who's going to produce value, if you aren't someone who's going to allow surplus value to be extracted, if you aren't someone who's going to take a lower wage than what you produce, then you're just not someone who's typically wanted, and that's why you don't get to emigrate, unlike these very, very high class visa programs for very high skilled laborers like doctors.
Right.
Yeah, Caleb gets this right as well. I haven't actually heard any sound bites of Caleb talking about immigration, but I know he is an anti-globalist, and obviously one of one of the main pillars of globalism is international mass migration for laborers. Planned economies couldn't have too much immigration. You know, if you had a planned economy, you wouldn't need to have immigration in the first place, because immigration is just a real physical symptom of capitalist accumulation. It's just everyone going to where capital is, and capital is in the first world, and that's why everyone is immigrating towards the first world. Oh, it looks like we lost Jesse Grant. Um, I'm watching your call on Vaush right now, and I'd love to discuss your references to technocrats and direct democracy. I am doing research and learning. You see, the thing is for me is I had that debate with Vaush before I started to do a little more research into direct democracy. Now, I'm a big fan of Paul Cockshaw, and Paul Cockshaw is actually a proponent of direct democracy, and I could make a video or I could be on a live stream and explain my viewpoints, opinions, disagreements, perhaps with Paul Cockshaw. Let me add Jesse Grant. I can express my, you know, like I said, agreements, disagreements with Paul Cockshaw and his views of direct democracy, but that would definitely be something I would do.
Yeah. Sorry for having left. I received a phone call.
No, it's good. What does he say right here?
Let's see here.
Yeah, I mean, another thing he says, which he says right here, another thing he says is, well, what do wages have to do with immigration? And this is just basically denying the insurmountable amount of evidence that when you have a large surplus of immigrants, then you're going to destroy the union and you're going to have a large reserve army of labor. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, are you familiar with the actual textbook definition of the word immigrant?
No, I'm not.
So, the textbook definition is a person who comes to live permanently in a foreign country. Now, the thing is, what they like to do is they like to conflate migration, which is just a simple one person from a foreign country moving to another country, which that's not accurate to say that that is. All right, put it this way. All immigrants are migrants, but not all migrants are immigrants. Immigrants come there specifically to live permanently. And here's the thing: you got a choice between one of two arguments. You got the right wing argument that, well, all these immigrants, they're just on welfare. Now, we know that to not be true materially. We got plenty of empirical evidence to suggest otherwise. So, what do they have to do in order to live? They have to get a job. And so, when you have jobs in a country, whether you like it or not, there's only a certain amount of like actual jobs. You have to tie a number to the job, right? So, there's like, oh, well, we only got this many jobs here in America. Well, the thing is, if you only got that many jobs in America and you got all these people coming in that have to live here permanently in order to constitute being an immigrant, then what are they going to do? They have to compete against native workers, or rather former workers, in order to drive up their value. And a lot of times they get picked over them because they can afford to pay them less.
Yeah. Let's see. Any comments? No. Okay. Now, one thing that I find really funny that Vaush does is that he asks, he does the Destiny tactic of asking his audience to find certain sources.
Google it for me.
Yeah, Google it for me.
I'm playing a video game. I can't Google it right now.
Yeah. He's not nearly as bad as I went through this. I went through this. I don't know why I can't talk tonight. I think I'm just freezing my ass off. I went through this brief phase where I was like utterly seething at this copycat of Vaush called Xander Hall.
Yeah, I've tried to get in touch with him.
Yeah, I was on one of his live streams and he permanently denounced me from his stream, so I don't think he'd ever want to talk to me. But I mean, one thing that I see is it's kind of an ad hominem to say this, but one thing I see is that these guys kind of run perverted sexual cults. But that's just something to leave to the conspiracy theories, apparently. Is this about wage suppression? Yes.
Yes, it is.
Absolutely. Liberals would argue that the increased labor force would create additional jobs to sustain them. That is absolutely not true. I mean, so liberals would argue that the increased labor force would create additional jobs to sustain them. I mean, the amount of jobs. So let's think about creating a job, right? What do you have to create a job? Well, first of all, you need to have capital. Now, how you get capital is usually by having some kind of finite capital in order to, let's say, rent out a building, let's say, open up a shop. The amount of jobs that you can generate is proportionate directly to how much profit you can make from hiring workers. Obviously, you can't go hiring a ton of workers, law of diminishing returns. So what you're going to have eventually is more workers than owners. Not everyone can become an owner, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Came in late to the stream, that's fine. Liberal capitalists is what they are. Post-Nazwell Judaism is apparently still around. Hello. I remember that little arc with Danky King.
Yikes.
Yeah, Vaush really blew up. He went from like 40,000 subscribers to like 200,000. It's crazy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, in terms of my debate with Vaush, a couple things that I wanted to clear up. First of all, I wanted to clear up some of my thoughts on direct democracy and what I meant. So, towards the end of my debate, I really try to make an argument against anarchism. And the reason why is because every time anyone ever mentions anarchism, they immediately go into an ad hoc mentality. Vaush is absolutely an example of someone in an ad hoc mentality. If you challenge him on a certain point, he'll say, well, we'll just fix that. Oh, I'm going to bring up a point about, for example, the CNT FIA, which is something that most anarchists will put forward as an example of, well, what is anarchism or what is anarcho-syndicalism. The CNT FIA was famous for its labor camps. It was famous for having a labor bureaucrat. if you read Workers Against Work, this is mentioned in Workers Against Work,
Yeah.
and it's just hilarious to me how this can be their prime example. But if you talk about that, anarchists, at least some anarchists, will get into the state of ad hoc moving from left to right. And I think in terms of discourse, if you really don't have a solid example of something that you can point to, for example, just some society, some experiment that you can point to as, hey, this is my foundation for my ideas, then you aren't worth arguing with.
Yeah, and even if we took Vaush at his strongest point, and we said that he wasn't a market socialist, but instead he was an anarcho-syndicalist. Well, I got news for Vaush. That's not socialism. The thing about syndicalism is if you want to make the entire economy unionized or a co-op or whatever the hell he wants to do, uh, that is still capitalist structures. Unions are created within the capitalist system because of the boss-employer power dynamic. It's not socialism because of that very fact. And so you can't, there's no such thing as a socialist union. There's no such thing as socialist wages. And so a lot of what he's talking about here, there's no socialist money if you really think about it. So the thing is, what I'm trying to say is if we took him at his strongest point, even still, he wouldn't be a socialist.
Yeah, I mean, even if we went from, okay, so market socialism, obviously a complete and utter meme,
Yeah.
to even to anyone who has even opened up the first chapter of capital. What is capital? Well, ultimately, capital is generalized commodity production. Market socialism, ultimate meme, because you're just living in a society of all co-ops. Okay, that's the dynamic part of production, but at the same time, you're still producing for value. You're still producing for surplus value. You're still producing for exchange value. You're still producing according to the market. It's obvious capitalism. Nobody disputes it. Now, anarcho-syndicalism, as you just said, is still capitalism because it just maintains that value-derived and value-oriented society. Profits are in command, Mao Zedong. And even at his strongest, he really is a capitalist. And the thing is that he did to me is that, and the thing that I want to clear up is that I don't go around using 100-year-old terms because I want to seem smart or because I want to confuse people. If you watch my stream that I did before Christmas on Fellow Travelers channel, where I talked to the Social Democrat man on the wall, I did not use any of those terms and I explained it perfectly. If you want to explain it to someone like Vaush, you just tell them, or just to a liberal or conservative, you just
Right.
tell them that ultimately what companies are doing is they are paying people less than what they are producing. That is all you have to tell them, that the sustainability of the worker is less than what they are ultimately going to work and producing. And you can show them Cockshot's graph and Towards a New Socialism, where he shows, through the UK, like, for example, steel production, I believe, in Towards a New Socialism, he shows a pie graph, and it shows that only a sliver of what the worker produces is his own sustenance. So it's very easy to demonstrate without any terms whatsoever.
Yep.
Let's see. Vaush says that anarcho-syndicalism is just an end goal, which contradicts the third rule of anarchism. You can't be ansim and want to transition. And he says we need markets for trade with countries. Yeah, I. Oh, and another thing that Vaush said, which is hilarious to me, is that he talks about abolishing the commodity form. And I don't want to toot my own horn here, but Vaush started making these BS videos about him, quote unquote, reading theory after my debate with him. So I feel like I just kind of took him down the road of stupid town. I took him, I exposed him for never even cracking open one of these books. I mean, look at Jimmy Dore. He's reading Lenin's Highest Stage of Capitalism. He's reading Lenin's book on
Yeah.
on stream. I mean, he is doing more reading than Vaush. Vaush literally doesn't even give a shit about imperialism. His views are so narrow within the paradigm of party politics. You might as well just be listening to the Twitter of a Biden canvasser. But what about the squad? That's one of my favorite terms.
What about the squad?
Can't even hold against Nancy Pelosi. You know, what is it, like the word missile in the new coronavirus stimulus bill is mentioned like over 100 times.
Yeah,
I mean, come
it's
on.
atrocious. It's really atrocious because, like, we're having, like, you see these memes now, like it says, "Let them have $600." It's making a play on the words of Marie Antoinette of
Uh-huh.
"Let them eat cake," and so let them have $600, and that's pretty much what we're having to do. We're having to negotiate with the other estates here. But the Jacobites are going to be told that they're a bunch of tankies. They got to stop. This is ultra.
Yeah, and the theory of BreadTube is really that BreadTube has such a low barrier to entry that it has significantly more viewers. I mean, if we look at some of these numbers, Vaush is getting 200,000 people, 200, 300,000 people watching because he has 200,000 subscribers. When you make videos tying into social issues which are easy to understand, for example, trans rights, for example, rights for people of color and indigenous people, obviously these things are very important, but when you represent these groups of people against another group of people, Marxist Leninists, who have significantly higher barriers to entry to understand, I mean, it can take someone a long, long, long time to understand Marxism Leninism in comparison to understanding why black people should have the same rights as white people. And when you really pit people who are for racial and gender equality against people who have a lot more significantly harder to understand beliefs, then it's obvious why so many people are on Vaush's side compared to ours.
Well, yeah, it's just a standard thing that he looks more optical because if you look at the best side of his side, you got he claims to represent like the civil rights era and stuff like that, fighting for the rights of as you said, indigenous people, LGBTQ people, people of color. And so when you represent that side, you're going to look good just generally because to argue against it is to argue for hate. But to argue against our side is a common narrative. And it's pushed, in CNN, BBC, uh, MSNBC, so on and so forth. It's pushed all throughout the West. And it's very, very convenient to hold that position and to not do enough research into our positions. And this is why I actually believe that there is hope. There is hope to convince people like Vaush. If we can make an articulate argument to him, and we can, try and work with what we do agree on and what we don't agree on. Because here's the thing, I'm not going to lie, there are some tankies, quote unquote tankies, that do chill out with some Nas bowls, and that's, to be honest with you, that's kind of cringe.
Hmm.
And I don't think that we need to be hanging out with those types of people. And we need to make it firm that we are simply just Marxist progressives. We want progressivism, but through Marxist channels, not necessarily through whatever the hell he is. You know?
Hmm. Very, very interesting question. Would it be exploitation to make money off the stock trade? This is kind of a multifaceted question because if you think about it, why do stocks have value in the first place? Stocks have value because ultimately there's workers behind it producing value for whatever company that's being represented on the market. So if you invest into a company, you may not be technically exploiting, but you may still be benefiting from the fruits of that exploitation. Ultimately, in terms of pragmatics in real life, I would invest because it's a very safe and reliable method to secure yourself financially. And in these times, it's really important. Some other comments. Not to id pull you, but I'm trans, and the whole trans rights thing is so hollow when the only rights that someone like Biden fights for are my rights to participate in imperialism, which is completely true. I mean, I hate to sound like a PragerU, Daily Wire shill, but one of the funniest quotes to me that gets seemingly ignored by CNN and MSNBC is the whole racial jungle with segregating schools that Biden brought up.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah.
it's if you look at North Carolina, the towards the coast of North Carolina this year actually went to Donald Trump. There was no not that much of a chance for Biden to get it. Of course, that was against what I had initially thought, but I was surprised to see that. The coast of North Carolina, in these areas where you're seeing lots of black people, they simply just did not come out to vote for Biden. That they just did not give a shit. Now, they did come out to vote for Roy Cooper, but they did not come out to vote for Donald Trump or Joe Biden either. So it's incredible to me how they overlook these very real circumstances that are going on. They turn off the blinders off and they're like, nope, that's white boy talk. You can't say that because if you don't vote for Biden, you're hurting black people. You got to vote for the segregationist in order to do something for black people.
Yeah, it's just incredible. Let's see. Any other comments worth reading? The CNTFI was basically when the anarchists left the regular Republican side to make the epic communes in Catalonia. Yeah. Roy Cooper marched with BLM protesters. Oh, go on.
Yeah. So let's get into the Trotsky part of your debate. Yeah. So the thing is, like Vaush, he really tried to smear you with the red baiting and the Stalin shit.
Yeah. The thing is, for me, is when you want to start discussing that, that's a completely different topic that'll take 20, 30 minutes to discuss. And another thing, too, is you have to start off, first of all, with the good things that Trotsky did. And then you have to talk about where Trotsky went wrong, because Trotsky was not someone who ultimately, throughout the entire history of the Russian Revolution, was doing wrong. I mean, if we one of the most important chapters in any book I have ever read is the first chapter of Revolution Betrayed, when Trotsky talks about the economic achievements of the USSR, which is one of the best chapters that you can show someone, especially someone who is on a very basic liberal perspective about the USSR. The thing is the collaboration with the fascists, the undermining of the Soviet Union, and the undermining of what socialism really is, which is a transitionary period towards communism. And another thing too is the basic sort of Animal Farm-esque viewage of, Lenin, for example, if he knew what socialism in one country was, he probably would have thought that, Lenin was against socialism in one country and was for quote-unquote international socialism or permanent revolution. And there are so many little things too. I mean, Finbowl actually made a really funny video a lot of years ago talking about how Lenin was very against Trotsky in a lot of aspects, including permanent revolution, but also with stuff like war communism. And Trotsky ultimately was he was a traitor. I mean, ultimately, Trotsky did conspire with fascists.
Yeah, that's true. He actually went to go speak for Benito Mussolini against Stalin. And granted, yes, he did speak to different people. Like, for example, he spoke to the Mexican communist painter Diego Rivera. As you know, that's Frida Kahlo's husband. He went to go have dinner with him and her. And there's, of course, been rumors about whether she had an affair with him. I don't really care either way if that's true. But yes, he did go to speak with true socialists. But the thing is, he also spoke with fascists. He spoke with Benito Mussolini about Stalin. And, it's where you get the famous quote about like what Trotsky said about Hitler. He said, at least he's a killer with, what is it? He said he's a killer with vision. Yeah, he said, at least he's a killer with vision.
Yeah.
And so that's some rabid anti-Stalinism there.
Mm-hmm.
To the point where you support Nazism. Like, ooh.
I mean, most people don't even understand, too, where Stalin came from. I mean, he basically came from backwards Georgia. And Brezhnev, too, was a steel worker. I mean, to these people, there is right and wrong, and there is a monolithic good and a monolithic evil. And I think really the easy part is looking at, for example, if you go to google.com, you type in Stalin. I mean, it sounds cliche, but what you're going to be shown is decades and decades of subversive anti-communist propaganda. I mean, for example, when the Christian Democrats in Italy were running against the Italian Communist Party, the amount of tactics that the CIA performed are absolutely ridiculous. They got, for example, and you can read all this in Killing Hope by William Blum. They got famous Italian actors and singers to come out and deliver messages and speeches talking about how there will be an emaciation of Italy if the Italian Communist Party is elected. And it's just absolutely ridiculous. They dropped flyers, letters. They went on the radio, broadcasting. I mean, we were flying nuclear, planes capable of deploying nuclear weapons over Vietnam. So to state, and then at the same token, it's the same old trope that, hey, stop having failed, communism. Why do you keep failing? At the same time where the U.S. keeps going into, for example, Bolivia and other countries and stopping them from having socialist revolutions in the first place.
Yeah. So on the topic of Trotsky himself, do you believe that he deserved to be killed, and/or do you believe that he was a terrorist?
Well, I do believe that Trotsky absolutely was a terrorist. I mean, do I believe that certain people deserve to be killed? Not necessarily. I mean, it's kind of a moral perspective for me. It's not something that I can. I mean, my main argument against the death penalty has to do with economics, but I don't really believe that states should be executing people. I don't really see that as a fair way to resolve a trial because I'm ultimately just anxious about what happens if we execute the wrong person. But in terms of the historical position that the USSR and Stalin was in, I think it was absolutely necessary that Trotsky had to be executed. I absolutely think so.
Yeah. Generally, I agree with you.
As a Russian who has actually had frequent run-ins with the Nazgul Party, I can confirm that nobody outside of Russia has actually identified as one of us. And I don't actually know much about the actual Nazgul Party, but the actual perception of Nazgul is it's obviously a meme, but we all know this, so I won't go into it.
Yeah.
Nasrot. For example, how can you support Stalin stopped German busing of SS members to Moscow? Oh my god. That is true. Trotsky conspired to kill Stalin, and most people don't understand that most high officials in the USSR were panicking. I mean, Stalin had like 5 attempts on his life. It's ridiculous. Well, I mean, far more than 5 attempts on his life.
Yeah, most certainly.
Stalin was the first influential Marxist from a proletariat background. Yeah, I would agree with that. Absolutely. I mean, yeah. The biggest beef anarchists have with MLs is that they killed Trotsky first.
I'm sure some of them Kronstadt sailors would have liked to have done that.
Okay, this is something. Don't misgender or you'll be canceled. I mean, the thing is, you shouldn't. I mean, it's just really a principle of respect. I mean, and another thing is this ties in a bit with the tactical N-word thing, the Vaush. And the thing is like, the thing is with gender pronouns is that ultimately it's a thing of respect. If you want to respect someone, then it just shows respect. Okay, it's something that they want. Like, no matter what, let's just ignore the transgender politics. Let's just ignore all gender politics for a second. If you want to respect someone, for example, you're not going to insult them. You're not going to use performative language against them to insult them. But in terms of making a mistake about it, I don't believe that should obviously get you canceled. I mean, certain people have, for example, gone against Jason Unruh, like for purposely misgendering Anarcho-Pac, and I don't know. I mean, if you dog someone, then I'm not going to comment on it. But if you dog someone, I believe that you should face a little bit more than a repercussion of just being verbally insulted in the form of being misgendered. Hakeem will destroy Vaush. Well, I saw something really quickly. I saw something the other day, which was one of the worst bad faith things I've ever seen. And that was Vaush invited Hakeem on stream. a non-native English speaker onto stream. Now, this is Vaush we're talking about. This is someone who will trample over you and interrupt you. Do you really believe that Vaush is going to let someone like Hakeem, who doesn't have a native grasp on the English language, onto his stream and give him a fair representation of himself? Obviously not. I mean, he couldn't even give a native English speaker a fair representation. So that
Yeah,
would
and
just be
I
destructive.
think a lot of that ties into a Eurocentric view of, like, for example, a certain, like if you were to go to like a Ghana or something, and you were like speaking English, their understanding of English is not the exact same way we understand English. So, for example, certain idioms will go completely over their head. And a lot of Vosh's debate tactics, you pretty much have to be an American to understand some of his humor and some of the stuff that he does, and just the cute little tricks that he picked up from Destiny to debate people.
Hmm. It's just something that gets passed down like father, like son. I mean, did you see that debate with Destiny where it was in real life and they were sitting on the couch? I mean, first of all, Vaush is big and tall and Destiny is short, so there was a weird dynamic there where they were kind of quiet.
Yeah,
Let's see.
I understand that.
Vaush is mostly correct in his analysis, and he's a great debater and public speaker, but I agree he's quite unprofessional. Like, I don't deny, first of all, Vaush is a good speaker. Like, okay, let's pretend, for example, this whole tanky arc, this whole tanky aspect never existed. I would not say a single bad thing about Vaush. Maybe I would call him a liberal, whatever. There's a reason why I'm not out here, for example, making tons of videos about Jimmy Dore. There's a reason why I'm not saying, oh, Jimmy Dore's such a moron. Why doesn't he read, you know, why doesn't he go out and actually read some hard, economic theory or history or whatever? There's a reason why I'm not saying that, and it's because Jimmy Dore is coming from a good place. He's not attacking people left of him; he's attacking people right of him. I mean, Nancy Pelosi is definitely right of him, so he's attacking Nancy Pelosi. But Vaush is also shooting left, you know. So
Yeah, I understand that. And a lot of one of the things about Jimmy Dore that I think gets misunderstood is they say, well, why doesn't he attack Republicans enough? It's like what they say about us. Like, why don't we go after fascists enough? Why are we too busy debating Vaush and stuff? Well, the thing is, we already know that the other side is messed up. We don't really need to talk to them. There's like well, we do need to speak to them, granted, but we don't need to like engage in these long, harped out, series with them, because we're not, for the most part, a lot of their stuff can't be corrected. For example, like Steven Crowder, you're not going to convince him to be a leftist unless you were to go through his wallet and remove all those donations that he gets from big Texas donors, the oil donors. You can't deal with people like that. However, I think people like Vaush, who just gets Patreon streams and he gets the super chats and gets that kind of money. I think he can be convinced because he's not super rich himself, to my knowledge. But I know that his dad is. His dad is like a Hollywood executive, correct?
yeah,
Yeah. So I think it'd be a lot more. There's a bigger case to be made that we can convince him over somebody like Steven Crowder, for example. And yeah, I'd be willing to work with him on a lot of stuff if he would just, stop shutting out tankies.
yeah, and one last thing before I wrap things up. You know, I have had so many people come to me on Discord. I've had so many people DM me and tell me, "Hey, I think Vaush treated you unfairly," and I'm not making this up. I've had tons of people come to me who are Vaush fans, and they're saying, "Hey, I think Vaush was a little too rude to you. You were really calm. You presented, you sounded like you knew what you were talking about. Can you point me the right way?" And I show them to some of my videos or some other great ML content creators' videos, and that's definitely why I target BreadTube. it's very hard to target. For example, RedTube, right? RedTube are closer ideologically to us than going to, for example, Eric Stryker's YouTube channel and talking to a bunch of racists who believe in the JQ. You know, you can convince people like that, and you definitely should make an effort to go out there. And I have made an effort, in some of my videos and in some of my debates. Some of my earliest videos were me talking about, Ben Shapiro and random shit like this. But
Yeah.
it's important to target those who are in your home field. It's like, don't go. I'm trying to think of an analogy for it, but don't go 20 miles away to pick flowers when there's a garden right in your backyard, I guess is one way to say it.
Yeah, I certainly agree. And I think that there is a possibility because there's this guy on Instagram. His name is Micah Irfan. Micah Irfan, for the longest time, was just your run-of-the-mill, typical DSA member. And that's all he did. He just always talked about, we got to have socialism and democracy. We got to support our Democrats. And he did that for the longest time. Now he's an ML because of conversations I've had with him. And he's had conversations with Otto Bolshevik. I'm sure you know who that is.
Yes.
And so we've had conversations with this dude. Now he's an ML. He's speaking, more positively of, the former ML states. And so it's a good thing to see somebody with that much influence already, because he's a lot bigger than I am. And I grew a little bit from talking to him, but the ultimate growth that I had from talking to him was not from getting more followers, but because I was able to speak to him in a coherent and concise way and make the argument to him as if I was intelligent and I knew what I was talking about, because I have read. A lot of these Vaush fans have not read theory. Vaush himself has not read theory. So the thing is, it's just a matter of how you make the argument, how you speak to people, the way you speak to people, and how you talk about it with other people.
Yeah, exactly. Some closing remarks. Do you have any closing remarks?
No, other than the fact you should go follow my Instagram. It's the Real Chatical Kamikaze. The Kamikaze is spelled with a D before the Z, so mind that. It's really easy to find. If you just type in Jesse Grant, it'll be right there. But yeah, my Instagram, obviously my YouTube. I'm sure you'll put that in the description below.
Yes.
Leftism. Yeah. But yeah, definitely go check me out, dude. I'm really, really trying my best to grow some. I really want to.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely give me support, comrade. And yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Jesse Grant, everyone, really good speaker. I mean, definitely a good conversation. No comments I see. So anyway, I just want to keep everyone on the lookout. I'm going to be making a reading list video. I'm going to be making a intuitive reading list video, how you can go from basically square one to the maximum amount of potential that you can reach with your reading. And it will be available on my YouTube channel in the next few days, absolutely free. So yeah, anyway, good conversation. No link in description. I will update it. I will obviously put my good friend Jesse Grant in the description. All right. So,
one more thing.
Yeah.
I want you to put a link to my my Discord server, because tonight I'm going to be having a debate against two social democrats. Me and my buddy Nate Garcia. We're obviously MLs, and we're going to be debating two Democrats. And yeah, we're going to have a legitimate conversation, and hopefully we can, filter some of this stuff out. So
yeah, for sure. Is it going to be live stream?
No, it's not going to be live streamed because they requested not to be recorded. But if you go to my server, 12:30 in the morning. I know it's 12:30 in the morning, Eastern time. If you live in the East, that's the time it's going to be. Yeah, we're going to be having a discussion in my server, and if you want to come watch, most certainly.
All right, for sure. Well, I'll leave it in the description, and I will comment it. So anyone who wants to go watch that, definitely go ahead and see it. Anyway, this has been LT, everyone. I've been joined by Jesse Grant. Thank you guys for coming out. I'll see you guys later. Of course.